Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to today's session. I am Haritina Mogoshanu. I am a space science communicator and the Vice President of SCANS. SCANS is short for the Science Communicators Association of New Zealand, and it's a network of people who tell stories about scientific topics. We hold regular events for people who are keen to hone their storytelling skills and connect with like-minded professionals. Just to say here on the beginning that we will have a Q&A session at the end of the panel, and you are very welcome to write your questions in the Q&A box at any time during the talk. Also, the session is being recorded for viewing later as well. There will be a pop-up that notifies all attendees that is being recorded. So if you really need to leave, you can always catch up later. Our session today, it's called Purposeful Storytelling, Effective Ways to Deliver Engagingly Online. And our speaker today is DK. DK is a creative producer. He is the TEDx Wellington Women licensee, founder of Creative Welly, plus the Creative Leadership New Zealand Conference. He's also one of my favorite people on earth. He's also a speaker coach. He has over a decade of working in the social media space, consulting, delivering training on 5 continents and to a cross-sector range of clients from UNICEF, Gates Foundation, BBC. Wow. He also established Collider, a citywide program focused on transforming Wellington into an internationally recognized smart capital. Over to you, DK.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation, SCANS. It's great to be connected with all you people, even though it's digitally. So wherever you are, I hope you're being safe and well. So I'm going to do a 40-minute presentation, and then we'll have a 20-minute Q&A. And like Harry said, if you've got any questions throughout, just utilize the chat, and we'll pick them up at the end. So hopefully you'll have some fun through this. So really, I want to start with a question. And that question is, how would you get 400 strangers to dance with you? How would you go about that? What stories would you tell? And what kind of invitations would you put out to actually move that amount of people with you if you've never met them before? That was the brief that I gave myself at a conference a few years ago. And just to prove that it can be done, this is a short video of 400 strangers that I never met before, because I was the closing keynote of a conference, just dancing with me. And just to prove it, I come up there, that's me, bad dancing, white boy dancing right at the bottom there. So I was dancing and they joined in with me, and there's people on the stage behind it you can't see as well, because they all came down and joined me as the closing keynote. And that was one of the first times I really understood from a speaking perspective how to really move people into action. And that was the actual event that I spoke at. It was a sandbox summit, it was called. It was about play, learning, and technology. That was the subject. I was asked to close the whole conference. It was a 2-day conference at MIT over in Boston. So quite a privilege, quite a bit of a crescendo for my career. Previous to that, as Harry said, I've been bouncing around the world and been speaking publicly and doing a lot of training and facilitation sessions around digital and social media and helping people to learn to be more creative online. So this felt like a culmination of a lot of those years' efforts. But if I kind of rewind back a little bit, this is also me in the valleys of South Wales, hence why I sound like this. I am Welsh. So I was brought up in a place called Pontypridd, and that's me when I was about 6 years old, wearing a Liverpool football kit. And if you know anything about the South Wales valleys, that's brave right there, because obviously it's a rugby nation, or stupid, whichever way you want to look at it. I was one of 3 boys. I was the runt of the litter, and I always reminded that I always will be the runt of the litter. But magically growing up as well, I had some real fun challenges, so we say, which shaped me going forward. One of the biggest ones is I'm hearing impaired. So I'm 25% in one year, 50% in another. But growing up as a young age, I couldn't speak properly. So I had to go and have, for 10 years, speech therapy. just because I couldn't hear certain sounds, and therefore I had to learn how to not just hear them, but also articulate them as well, because I wasn't hearing them, and therefore I couldn't articulate them. So it's real funny for me to reflect on that little boy back then, and then fast forward being on a closing keynote stage at MIT and having some fun up there and being very, very comfortable doing that. So the adaptability of the human condition is, I think, lived right here and quite ripe to go, okay, we can hack this system. If you're quite scared and nervous about public speaking or presenting, I can help you, definitely. But just a little bit more about my background. I actually started in local government, worked my way up in the chief executive department, had a lot of fun. This is back in England when I used to live there. And then I also started my own businesses in the digital and social media space, a couple of them. We were turning over 6 figures, employing about 7 people. As Harry said, worked on 5 continents, worked with people like UNICEF, Gates Foundation, so on and so forth. And then I came to New Zealand in 2011, quick count there, as a social media manager for a national education company. And again, I was all to do with digital learning and stuff. And then since that time, I did 18 months with them. I've done lots of other different things. One of them is I've now become known as an event producer. So I do a lot of events that you'll never see for clients in the top right-hand side there, internal events to brief around learning experiences. And then I do my bigger events like the Creative Leadership, TEDx Wellington. And like Harry said, I also launched a citywide event campaign where we did 200 events in 40 months. And boy, did I get to see a lot of speakers trying to engage people in my time doing that. But I also do coaching for various organizations, whether to brief, or I do what I call masterclasses, where I go in and I deliver like a beginner's and an advanced session on public speaking and engaging or purposeful storytelling. And over the last couple of months, definitely I've been doing a lot more online. And I've also been doing some other weird things like Creative Valley, where I get people together and we have courageous conversations with bold humans. That's the tagline. So you can see I'm doing a lot of different things, and I pull from a lot of that when it comes to storytelling and presenting. And last but not least, should we say, as I mentioned, I'm doing quite a bit of work online, not just podcasting recording, which I've been doing since 2006, but I'm now doing it for other clients. But I'm also emceeing a lot of events online, at least 2 a month, where we get 300 to 400 people together globally around architectural design and construction industry. This is obviously for a client, but I'm trying now to do MCing online and help people speak and engage really, really kind of with heart, shall we say, or manner, as you would say here. So as mentioned, I'm also the licensee for TEDx Wellington, and I want to linger here just a little bit because I've also been doing that for 7 years, and we put all our speakers through a 6-week or 5 to 6 week coaching experience before they get on that stage. And the TED experience has taught me a lot, but it's also brought up a lot of interesting scenarios, so we say, and reflections around the industry and sectors of events and webinars and everything else. So what I call the TED effect. So simply, we all understand what TED is, technology, education, design, if you never knew what it stood for. These are these big conferences that happen every year now in Vancouver. It's been going for 30 years as an entity. But for the last 10 years, you can access the rich plethora of talks online. And you've probably been sent these, Slack these, TikTok these, all the other kind of mediums. You probably are aware of TED Talks and what it means. Now, what that's done is it's raised people's expectations when it comes to listening to a presentation. So we now know what quality looks like when it comes to giving talks. We've become quite literate in that regards because we've watched a lot of TED Talks. Flip that as well for conference organizers like myself. I also have a higher expectation if I'm booking someone. And I actually look less at the names of people and their pedigree based on title, but more how can they communicate well. I don't care who you are, but have you got a great story and can you communicate it well? I don't care, because I put so many people on stages who have titles that fall over because they're not great storytellers in that sense. They have definitely the pedigree in terms of their title, but not the kind of kudos to hold an audience, shall we say. So again, lingering a little bit, if you want to talk about what does excellence look like, and especially online today, if you are delivering or developing courses that are going to be consumed online, there is what I think a threshold of excellence. And that's this platform. If you haven't checked it out, please do. It's masterclass.com. It's a paid platform, but you can check it out without paying for it, just to see at the level of excellence that is out there. This is a highly produced version of what would be the best school on the planet or university on the planet. We got people like Gordon Ramsay teaching you how to cook, Annie Leibovitz how to take photos, Stephen Curry teaching you how to dribble basketballs. What they've done is they found masters in their discipline, and they've created beautiful content around them, teaching you or helping you to understand how they do what they do. And they develop that, and you can access it online. I think it's like $199. You get access to everything, like everything on there for a year. It's like amazing. And I'm not pimping it. I actually do know the founder of this. Yeah, I brought him over actually 2 years ago to speak at my conference, Creative Leadership. But I only pimp it from a perspective of look at what excellence looks like on there, and then reflect on that in terms of what you're offering in your space in terms of content online. So I'm going to kind of deconstruct that a little bit to try and give you some tips as well, because we want to make sure that you're taking away as much wisdom and stealing like artists in terms of writing down these notes and going, oh, I can do that next time. Thank you very much, DK. You made me look cool. So hopefully I can give you some tips. And this actually comes from a lot of it from a thing that I threw up online, which is when we went into lockdown and a lot of people started to jump online and start to present or deliver content through. I saw a lot of people doing it really badly. So I created a little video, and it's free. You can just type in tips and presenting just the D&K, and you'll find this little video. But what I wanted to do is break down those 5 segments that I highlighted. And very simply, once I start speaking to this, you'll get it, because you'll see how so many people don't do this. So the first thing I want to focus on is the lighting. When it comes to speaking through a digital means, lighting is sometimes what's often forgotten. You get the classic case of people setting up their laptops and they got a window behind them, which is the main light source, and they look like, you know, they're in the dark, but they're not. Or you got some really artificial lighting that makes them look very orange. Now, you can get away with that if you're obviously of ilk and you're presenting on something that is fantastically wonderful and delicious. However, people are straight away going to have a expectation of, especially if they're paying for content, around what quality is. So just getting your lighting right. Like I'm stood in my living room right now. I got the windows here, diffused lighting, and I'm making sure that you can see me clearly and the screen's easy to see. I've just considered it through the lens of the delegate or the viewer. So anything that you do online, always don't think about yourself. Think about the lens of the viewer or the attendee or the participant or whomever you called them. So that's lighting. That's the first one. Everybody can sort out their lighting. The second one is the camera. And what I mean by this is not what type of camera you use, although we can get into that like SLRs now with the switches and stuff, but literally where the camera is. You can see I've elevated the camera. I'm just using a laptop here, not any funky DSLR or different camera. It's the laptop and the camera in the MacBook that I'm using, but I've made sure it's eye level to me. And I'm stood for this just because I like to feel a little bit more energetic. And I get that when I stand in presenting. If I was sat down, I always feel like I'm not doing you a service. So this is just a personal preference for me. I'm not saying you have to stand, but because I'm standing, I've obviously got lots of things that stack up on my table to make sure this is overnight. Because the classic case is a lot of people just open their laptop, press go, and you're looking up their nose. And that just doesn't look attractive. So help yourself out by feeling like you're creating a connection with that eye height in terms of the camera. The third one I will say is about audio though. And again, I'm teaching you probably things you've probably thought about, but you've never really deeply considered. I'm using an ATS 2020, which is an Audio-Technica USB plug-in mic, and hopefully I'm coming through wickedly. I could have used the microphone on my laptop, but a lot of people do that, and then they tap on a laptop or the table, and then you get all those clicks and things, and that gets in the way of the stories that you're trying to tell and the engagement you're trying to create. So figure out what is the best option. I could have even used my USB bone conductive headphones because I'm a bit deaf. I use bone conductivity to get the sound into my brain. So I could have used these, but I always find this is a clearer sound, and I made sure that the levels are right before we even start. So again, figure that out for the listener, not just the viewer now. What is the best option for them? Okay, not for you. And then last but not least is the engagement side. Again, I want to talk about, well, how am I engaging you? Am I creating this sense of connection? In other words, I'm looking at the bloody camera. I'm not like looking over here or at my screen or doing this. You know what I mean? You are there. And if I look at my camera, ask where I'm looking. And then when it comes to the presentation as well, a lot of people online nowadays just share their screen. And I find that you lose the disembodiment of the connection then, because all you're seeing is a presentation and hearing a voice. And you're losing this micro kind of transactions between these micro inferences that I do, my hand gesticulations, my smiles, my cheeky little side glances. You're losing all that if you just share your screen. So I would say I've just got a particular setup here. I'm just using an external, obviously, monitor with another laptop that I can present through, and I feel a lot of freedom in this now, and I can stand and present like I am on stage rather than sitting down, losing that energy, having the wrong kind of focus on my mic and my camera and things like that, and then hiding behind the presentation. Most people want to humanize the excellence in which you're sharing or the stories. So make sure that you are seen in a sense, and just think about what does that look like for what you do online. Are you visible? Are you there a lot? And therefore, by being there, can people see your excitement? Or do you then have to learn how to communicate excitement? And that's what I want to get into in a little bit, but I just want to very briefly touch on what can help you. You don't have to have a setup like this. Maybe you don't have an external monitor. So how can you get away with this stuff? Well, there's a couple of tools online that I've been checking out. I've been playing around with, but to be honest, I prefer this setup. So it was just a preference for me, but I could have done this digitally. So there's something called which is MMHMM, which is a downloadable free little software that you can then have picture within picture stuff going on, just like a newsreader would with the little picture and things. And it's real fun and it's really easy to use. And then if you want to move up a level, there's something called OBS Studio, which is an open source software thing, which again does the similar things, but now you can plug in different cameras and you can literally use it like a studio, and you can have short keys on your keyboard to go camera 1, camera 2 is my presentation, camera 3 is the other camera, you know? So you can really up your game here and really think about it from a perspective of the viewer, not just like, oh, I got to present online now, I'm just going to share my screen and that'll be it, and I can read a script. Nah, people have higher expectations. So hopefully these tools can help you out if you don't like this kind of thing. So please check it out. And I can see someone checking it in the chat already, those links. So I also want to touch on, well, how do you actually deliver online? What are the models? How do you create connectivity, engagement? So I actually want to give you my model of when I'm working one-to-one with my clients. Usually I work with senior executives, and I usually get the brief of, hey, I got a big presentation to give. Can you come in and help me craft this a little bit better, edit it down and stuff like that? What I usually end up working with them on is, yes, the story, but also how they're delivering it. And I come up with 3 things that I actually work with my clients on. Sometimes I draw this as a triangle and I literally have them, written on each of the edges of the triangle, or I do a Venn diagram. So these are the 3 things that I work with my clients on. This is my model. So you can, again, take this away and iterate on it. The first thing I focus on with my clients is quite a soft word, but it's a very powerful one, and that's grace. This has got nothing to do with what you're saying. It's got everything to do with how you're saying it. Your intonations, your pauses, your stress pointers, your physicality. Yeah, how you stand, how you move, how you kind of look, how you gesticulate, all these things. So I'm looking for gracefulness when I'm looking at a presenter. And that can come through online, especially if you now get into the idea of you're sharing yourself versus you're hiding behind the presentation. The second one I want to touch on is credibility. This is another anchor point here to think about. What does credibility mean? In this context is what the stories you have chosen to tell. So I'll give you an example. If you stand up on stage or stand up or virtually in a webinar and you say, okay, the latest piece of research that we've read now illustrates X, Y, and Z. Cool. Versus for the last 10 or 15 years, I've been seeing this, this, and this. So therefore, blah, blah, blah. Cool. Between those both stories, one of them has more credibility than the other one, and it's the lived experience one. I'm not saying don't reference stuff. I'm just saying the emphasis of the stories must have credibility. And for the majority of the time, that comes through lived personal experience. So feel free to step into yourself, into your legacy almost, and pull from experiences when you're telling these stories. And that's what I work on with my clients. It's like, well, you've just given me a lot of data up there. What does that mean to you and your peers and the people you're speaking to? Make it credible for those listeners. And then the third one is got nothing to do with you as the presenter or speaker and everything to do with the listener or the attendee or the delegate. And I call this the emotional resonance. Big words for how are you making people feel versus what are you telling people to make them remember? Because there's that classic quote, you know, people remember how they feel a lot longer than what you told them. So again, in terms of when you're mapping out a story or a webinar or a presentation, you've got to have an emotional anchor points within it and think about, okay, am I leaving people up? Am I leaving people down? By the way, in the spectrum of emotions, one end being maybe happy, joyful, and the other end fearful and angry and stuff, the worst place you can be in that emotional spectrum is in the middle. For example, if you're talking about climate change, you actually want to be on the what's called negative end of the spectrum, but actually you want people fearful or angered and moving in action from that emotional standpoint versus something very joyous, right? So don't aim for the middle. Don't tell me stuff that make me go, meh. Give me something that makes me feel something. And again, that's how you communicate it, because you're smiling and you think it's funny, or being very serious. Again, that gracefulness. Those are the three things I work with my clients. So you can steal like an artist here and riff off them. But I want to kind of focus on a couple of those aspects because there's some fun things as you drill down. There's quite a few layers in them. It's not as simple as just making a statement. But the first thing I will say when I'm coaching speakers is I always steal their script. I literally physically take scripts off them. And I've worked with people like Dames and All Blacks, ex-All Blacks, so it's quite scary. But I literally steal their scripts and then I play with that and I go, okay, tell me about this story here. And they usually can tell me because they've lived it. And I ask them something else in the script, tell me about this little bit. And they usually can. And I'm going, why do you need this? Because you will read it versus just communicating from your heart. Because you've lived that experience, you don't need a script. If anybody's standing up there got a script, I know they haven't prepared right. Now, there's a script versus being prepared and having bullet points. Yeah, and we'll come to the bullet points in a minute. But there's another reason why you don't do scripts as well. We read differently than we speak because we write differently when we speak, right? So there's all that thing. You lose all the stresses and intonations and that variety in your voice if you're just reading it out. There are people definitely out there who can do it very well. Stephen Fry, for one, when he's reading Harry Potter, right? He can really give that energy at the right points. But that's a skill. Not a lot of people have that. So stay away from scripts. There's another reason, especially if you're doing it in person or you're holding scripts. Usually you're nervous and you shake and then people can see it shakes and that reinforces why you're nervous and all this other stuff. So always get rid of the script and never start with the script. Start with the bullet points, you know? So that's my first kind of challenge to you guys. The other challenge as well is that you can't practice public speaking. Now, this goes against everything in Toastmasters. Bless them. I've been to a couple of them and I struggle because I have different ideas of how people should present and how they should present well. I don't mind ums and ahs and, side things as long as they're communicating authentically or with their heart, right? But this has got an underlying idea here that you can't practice public speaking or delivering to a crowd of people, whether it be online or in person, because you can't create that situation in a faux situation. And a lot of people create scripts, then they practice their script in front of their cat or their spouses or maybe a video camera. And then when they're asked to do it in front of 67 participants that you don't know, you then go, oh my God, now there's 67 people I don't know. I hope I get through this. And it's a completely different situation. Now you can amplify that if you're doing it in person, or what's more often now is hybrid events where you're actually presenting in person, but it's being recorded and that's being distributed or streamed elsewhere. Now that ups the game even more. You can't practice that. You can only prepare for it. I'm sorry to use the sporting analogy here, but it's a good one from a perspective of anybody who's played sports in the past. You will understand what I mean when I talk about match fitness or having game legs or game time, because you can practice and practice, but once you're in a competitive situation, it's very different, right? Because it's a different scenario. I think public speaking is like that. It's almost like an exposure skill that you need just to try and then figure out how to get better and be quite open to feedback and iterate and craft and shave and do all this other stuff with it, right? So just forgive yourself, but know that you can't practice. You can only prepare to do this stuff. Yeah. So stop practicing over and over again. The other couple of things I want to mention is about movement. These are the really big things that I work on with my clients to make sure there's high engagement with the audience. Now, movement on a digital setting, again, because you can see me, I'm conscious of that. So I'm aware that I can raise my hands and make you there, and I can draw this comparison thing, or I can get rid of my hands and I can continue to gesticulate, which I'm doing now, but you can't see, and it doesn't really matter because I've thought about how far I want and how much you can see of me. Right? But some people really miss out on thinking about how free they can be when they move versus how constricting it can be. What I mean by that is some people have a kind of a physical tic, a manifestation of their nervousness that comes through that they're not aware of. That could be like someone could be hopping around a lot. They literally could be up there speaking. And then if you stood up and you're doing this a lot, I've put a dance track to me, I'm probably bopping away like that. So again, being aware of that, watching yourself back a few times going, oh, I didn't realize that every point I said, I kept on doing this. And that gets in the way because all people are seeing now is my hand and it could come in front of me as well. And then you lose my face and things like that. So you got to be aware of the movements can actually hinder as well as just being free up here and just to use these movements to expand on things, to focus on things. You also get the real bad people who use this, people like Donald Trump, who actually belittle listeners in their kind of focus. They kind of close you in. They make you focus down. It's almost like he's speaking to kindergarten people and he's going, hey, people, shut up. The master is speaking. So you can kind of see a lot of people using physical cues, and it illustrates what they think of the people they're speaking to as well. So just be aware of movement can actually tell a different story other than the one you're saying. Yeah. The other thing about presenting is, where do you look? Now, online, it's a fun thing to think about because it's so bloody easy. And most people don't understand that you just look one place. And that's that little camera, that little dot right there that I'm looking at right now. Okay, that's you. That's where you are. And it's brilliant. And it's so much easier than if I'm on a stage with 1,000 people, because I'm like, who do I look at? Well, what you do there is you speak to the corners, right? You come down, you speak to the top, you come, or 20 people, easy, you sweep. Okay, but looking is an attempt to connect to people and to engage with them. For example, if I did this whole presentation just looking down here, you would lose that engagement from me, especially when I'm trying to stress something. You can get away with just ignoring me now because I'm not looking at you. But the second I do this and lock you in, it feels like I'm connecting and engaging with you. So again, it's the simplest little trick. That's where you are. Look at the camera. And I've known some people as well to cut little faces out and put them on the camera and make sure you cut out where the camera is. So you're always looking at maybe a pretend face, maybe put up Thor there or whomever you think is cool, and make sure that you're looking at them constantly and pretend that you're looking at that person while you're presenting and throw your energy there. Yeah. But looking is such a crucial thing where you look to make that connection. Hopefully that's making sense for you guys and it's not too floaty. One of the things I've seen a lot of webinars do and presenters anywhere is use slides really badly. So you've seen I've used my slides hopefully to augment what I'm talking about, to illustrate things, to maybe maximize the point. Now, you can also use slides as metaphors. This is one of my favorite metaphors. Again, guns have bullets, bullets kill people, bullet points kill attention. I just made all that connection too. Because I've seen a lot of people throw up a lot of bullet points when they're presenting a lot of data. And what I'm going to do as a listener or a viewer is I'm going to read it. I can read faster than you can speak. And because I'm reading it, I'm not listening, because you can't do two things very well. So now I'm reading down maybe 5 bullet points, and you're finishing up as the speaker on bullet point number 1. You're moving to bullet point number 2. As the listener, I finished bullet point number 5, going back to number 1, because I don't know where you're speaking at, because you're on number 2 and you've lost me. You can see the point I'm trying to make. Bullet points are really bad at presenting data, unless you pull them in as you're speaking. So you could just have, okay, I'm going to share with you 5 points today about bullet points. The first one being, they're really bad unless they're coming in together. That's the first bullet point. The second one comes in, then you talk about it, then you bring it in. That's the only way to do bullet points. And big data spreads as well. Maybe you've got a flow diagram, some description. Don't throw it all up there. Reveal it, uncover it through a story. Have it coming in at your pace, not the pace that you want people to read, because you lose people's attention if you do that. Again, hopefully I'm making sense. Let's talk a little bit about models very briefly. There are some brilliant models out there of storytelling. Like, okay, I've got all the tech stuff now. I figure out how to use my body. Well, how do I tell the story? Story models. This is one of my favorite models out there. It is so simple, and no word of a lie, half of the TEDx Wellington people that we coach use this model once we show them, because it works with so many things. And it's a Nancy Duarte model. You can find it on the TED Talk. I think it's called The Secret Structures of a Great Talk. Nancy Duarte, fantastic talk. But I'll just walk you through it. All a great presentation have to have, or talk, or webinar, everything, is start with what is. Tell me about the current state. Then move to what could be or future state. Yeah. Then go back and forth, until you get to the end of the story, the presentation, the webinar. Leave me with a new bliss. So that's the simplest story. And I've literally sat with senior executives and I've drawn out of them their credible stories, and I've written them down on Post-it notes, just the headlines, nothing too deep. And then we sat back and we go, okay, what's the current state story here? What's the future state? We've ordered them up and down, and boom, we've got a presentation which has a lovely narrative arc through it. That as a listener, I like, because I understand where it is, what could be, what is, what could be, what is, what could be. There's the new bliss that you're trying me to get to. So please check out that video. There's another video that I want to share with you, and I want to speak over the top of it. This is from another TED Talk. This is OK Go, a very well-known band, and they create amazing music videos. But they're talking on the TED stage. You don't need to listen to this, because what I want you to see that there are more than, even though there's one speaker, there's more than one storyteller on the stage. So there's 4 of them in the band. The lead singer is actually talking through how they come up with the ideas. In other words, how they be creative, which is a highly complex and abstract idea. But what they're doing here is they're all participating in that story. Quite old school as well. They're holding things up, revealing things at the right narrative juncture, yeah, and turning things around. So you can see now, if you're thinking about how do you tell a story, I've got 2 people here. Are you literally just sat next to each other, just telling the story? And the other one's just doing nothing while they're speaking? Here's a really creative way to get people involved in telling that story. Move the camera right back. You could have done this. It's real fun to start thinking about how you can present very differently. So I'm going to end with a story. And again, it's a short little video that I can talk over the top with, which is really nice. This is from a very short clip from a BBC documentary about the Moken tribe. They're a sea nomadic tribe that lives off the east coast of Thailand on the Andaman Sea. I had to look it up, east coast of Thailand. These guys live on the sea, and they obviously dive for their sustenance and resources. But what's magic about these people is they have taught themselves to see underwater much better than you and I, us mere mortals. They do this by 2 ways. They change the shape of their eyes, literal. That's called accommodation. And they also change the size of their iris to allow in more or less light, with that combination, and you can see this on the kind of infrared stuff now, the iris becomes very small. With that combination, they can now see underwater so much better than you and I. And what's wonderful about this story is it's peculiar, right? It's odd, it's like jarring. It's also thinking about the human condition being, again, so adaptable, just like me when I couldn't speak, and I now I have to learn how to speak and listen properly, even though I can't still listen properly. So the idea here is that the adaptability of the human condition is really amazing. And what's mad about these young people and these Andaman Sea nomadic tribe is that they can teach you to do this. This is not a kind of a learned thing because they've lived on the sea and that's they can only do this. When you go diving with them, they can actually teach you to do this. So what usually is a physiological response that you think you cannot get involved with because you just think your body is going to do it, they've learned how to trick it out, and they've learned how to utilize it to see better underwater, and they can teach you to do that. And again, think about in terms of storytelling, engaging, public speaking, or presenting online, and your nerves and everything else. Don't worry about it from a perspective of we can build you, we can rebuild you, we can make you better with all these tips and tricks, these ideas about engagement through the lens of the listener and all these other tools that we've obviously shared with you today. And I'm sure some of the questions are going to ask me a lot more about these things. You can get so much more richer engagement, just understanding the little techniques of where you put your camera, how you do your sound, how you create the content that can still be seen, how you put yourself and humanize it there. So that's my kind of last slide, I think, from recollection. Yes, it is. Sorry, I bumbled through that a little bit. Sometimes my mouth gets ahead of my brain, and yeah, I have to remember to slow down so I can articulate properly. So forgive me for that. I am really hungry for you to ask me loads of questions now, and especially on stuff that I didn't touch upon, because I want to be challenged, especially on things that you might think, hey, hold on a minute, I'm not too sure about that. Feel free. So I know that Harry's going to come back in and she's going to then facilitate the questions. So it's good to have you back, Harry, and over to you.
Thank you, DK. That was a fantastic presentation, and I'm sure everybody learned so much. I am very curious, and I will take this as being the host. I can ask the first question. Of course. Tell me, why do you have that picture behind you?
That one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have very little pictures in my room. This is a painting from TEDx Queenstown, the first ever TEDx Queenstown that ran. The 100 people who attended all got these paintings, slightly different, but the same kind of style. And it's a light bulb with wings. So it's the, I suppose, ideas taking flight, which is just a beautiful metaphor for not only TEDx, but what we were experiencing. And it's nice to remind me to go a little bit bolder and be a little bit radical with my ideas as well.
Fantastic. We have a lot of ideas that are taking off right now. And I will start with the first one from Alison Pask. How many minutes a presentation should be?
Depends. So I think I did 40 minutes. Hopefully I kept you engaged. Anything over 40 minutes, I think you start to lose some people, especially if the majority of the audience is sat down. People get comfortable. It's not that they're not interested. They just get comfortable. The body slows down, the metaphysics and everything else kind of just goes. So I think if you're not creating some interaction, in other words, let's just stand up, move around, or let's have a bit of a movement break, things like that. Yeah, 45 minutes, I think, is a threshold. I have in the past done like an hour things, and again, I don't like them. So in my masterclass, I only do like 40-minute segments, so that on different like chapters, shall we say. But then again, there's so many other formats out there, thinking like Ignite format or Peshakusha format or Peshashka format. These are constricting formats presenting. Peshakusha is the most obvious one. The most people know that's when you get 20 slides, 20 seconds per slide. Once you start it, you can't stop it. So it's like 6 minute 40. And they're great ways to democratize voice. So if you got 10 people who need to speak, you can definitely give them 10 or 5 minutes each. But no, tell them we're going to use this format, and straight away, that's great. And you keep people engaged. The TED format, 18 minutes is the maximum. What's lovely about that, if you go to a TED conference or a TEDx conference, you know that if a speaker gets up and starts speaking and you're maybe disinterested or don't like the topic, whatever, you know, within 15 minutes, 80 minutes, they'll be gone. Next one will be on. So yeah, it depends on the context and the topics as well. Thank you though. Good question.
Fantastic. I have another question for you. This one is from an anonymous person.
Good.
It's on the top of the line. Any tips on story identification, finding a narrative within a scientific finding, for instance?
I would answer that by coming at it from the audience perspective. So if I had maybe a complex idea or a scientific theorem or whatever things I'm going to convey, I would think through the lens of the audience in terms of where their literacy is. That would make me think about where do I pitch it. So do I be very technical or do I have to deconstruct it much lower? But I also think about, well, what do I want them to feel and take away from this? And that for some people might be that you want to challenge them, or you want to elate them with the possibility of this new scientific thing, discovery, technology, whatever it is. So actually you want to be really enthusiastic, and the narrative should be driven towards the potential of it. And almost the exponential curve. You want to go crazy with it and look 20 years in the future what that will mean. So when you tell, narrative stories, you can actually extend it. You can pull back into history. You can tell it present day, then you can accelerate into the future. And that's the fun bit. You can really start to extrapolate out pathways and go, well, one way you could think about this is the resources are going to be depleted, blah, blah, blah. One way is we're going to save a huge amount of money. One way our infrastructure is going to be X, Y, and Z. So you can paint pictures for them to get excited or worried about. So that's the way I would approach it, is think through the lens of the viewer/listeners.
Great. I quite like how people can vote on the question. So here's another question, a lot of votes from Fleur. What about working with scientists who might like to show a lot of data and PowerPoint slides? What would you advise?
We get this a few times in TEDx Wellington, where we're dealing with the greatest respects, usually academics, who turn up with a lot of slides, with some funky little graphs with very small writing or bar charts, you know what I mean. So yes, I totally appreciate, how do you then manifest a more clearer, minimalistic approach to storytelling when people have been taught very different ways? It's hard to unlearn, right? It's hard to be challenged by asking them to do different things. I suppose the way I take it is I try to exemplify. I try to illustrate, here's an example of a very complex idea done in very simple ways. So actually lean into the bank of resources that you have to your hands, which is the wonderful Vimeo or Google or YouTube, and try to find examples that you can present to your scientists and say, look, I know you want to present this as a very technical thing, and we will have a technical diagram or whatever you come up with. However, we need to humanize this, because the people in the audience need to understand the impact. And the way to do that is to humanize the story. So it's either you humanize it through the speaker, you humanize it through the impact of the scientific thing that's going to go on, and it could be negative or positive. So I would very much try to find examples that you're trying to, that tries to exemplify what you're trying to get them to move towards, and then help them to humanize as much as possible, rather than, again, hide behind the data. And do what I said earlier as well, is to try to experiment with it. So take one of their complex slides and say, do you realize I can simplify this by doing X, Y, and Z, changing the colors, doing circles, but ignore all this, just focus on this bit. That's the most important thing. Or have a reveal coming in stages, so they can tell the story in stages, almost like chapters. Cool stuff. Cool question.
Great. Next question that has the most votes is from Susan. Where can we find some examples of story structure? That structure seemed so obvious once you shared it, but sometimes the obvious needs to be made obvious.
Indeed. So there are a huge amount of story structures out there, from the Freytag's classic, structure of stasis, kind of mad stuff happening. This is very film ethic. filmic, sorry, structure. Something happens and then, you know, a challenging thing, and then back to stasis. That's the most simplest thing. The other structure, which I sometimes tell some of my clients is, tell me what you're going to tell me and why it's important. Tell me it with the details, and tell me what you just told me, but humanize it. Again, that's another story structure. You could then go quite academic. I know there was some research out of Cornell University that looked at like the top 4,000 novels on the planet, and they discovered there's literally only 6 story shapes across all those models, from Icarus to Oedipus and stuff like that, the kind of story shapes, the man in a hole, the rise and fall again, all these other things. So check out that research. But from my perspective, it's just try to simplify it as much as possible. That's why I love Nancy Duarte's one, which is tell me the situation, tell me how to fix it, and then tell me this, you know, what is, what could be, what is, what could be, stuff like that.
Great. Next question, Natalie Bird. How do you give people in your organization the chance to prepare for presentations and grow in confidence? Any practical ideas?
Could you say that beginning bit again? I just missed the beginning bit.
How do you give people in your organization the chance to prepare for presentations and grow in confidence? Any practical ideas?
Indeed. So in some organizations I both work with and run myself, we have lunch and learn sessions. So we get people to present on things that they have found relating to the industry or sector that we're within. And literally you can do that weekly. Every Tuesday, we all get together, and you can do it in small or large case. In other words, it could just be your team. And then you're giving people an opportunity just to stand and hear themselves. And from what's mad about that is, from our educational system, I'm going to speak from a UK's perspective, but I know this is true in New Zealand as well, is that I've of a certain age that I was never taught how to speak. What I mean by that is the first time I spoke in public in front of peers was in university in a seminar class. Of course, I'm going to be bad at it. I'm not used to hearing my voice out loud with lots of eyeballs on me. And my lizard brain kicks in and going, shit, I'm food, right? Because that's my old brain going, run. A lot of eyeballs on you, you're going to be food, run out. So we've got to get used to that. That's why I say it's an exposure skill. So create situations for them to present is my point. Again, small or large, have internal learn sessions or radical idea sessions, or even use the Peshakusha or the Ignite formats or any other short form presenting formats. Maybe you only have 5 slides to tell me a story about what you're going to do in the next month to do with your work. That's really exciting you. So just give people chance to have voice. Now, it's not going to work for everybody, because I don't think you should force people into presenting. It's like asking everybody to do something that not everybody's going to be good at, but certainly give them a chance to have agency and voice. And I think that exposure, once people get into it, they'll be like, oh yeah, I am competent in this. I do have something to say. And it's so important that we give people that opportunity.
Next question is from Hannah. Fantastic talk. Thanks, DK. You said it's important not to hit a middle ground with feelings, but do you think it is more effective to take the positive, uplifting angle or the negative angle? Climate change is a good example.
Indeed, yeah. Like everybody does want to go on the joyous end of that spectrum. You are so right, Hannah. However, if you are maybe facing challenges in organizations, in fields of discovery, whether it be from resources, then actually it's the other end of the spectrum that will ignite action. In other words, if we're losing our funding, for example, you want to maybe say that in a way that does create some tension there. But then you also want to create maybe a pathway that's going to create some hope. So you can have two, like cognitive dissonance, right? You can hold, and especially clever people can hold 2 arguments in their heads and 2 emotional states in their heads or hearts at any one time. And that's where the richness comes from. If you can do 2 rather than just 1, then we're having fun, because yes, climate change, when you hear someone like Greta Thunberg speak and you're like, whoa, okay, that's just hitting me. Of course, we should be doing that. She's going for the gullet. But then she's a young person, and I feel hopeful that she's the one being more articulate than some of our world leaders. So that, again, I'm holding two ideas and emotions, but overall, it's given me that emphasis to do something. So if you can do both, then you're on a winning team.
I have a tricky question for you. For the next one from Katie. Who made the biggest improvement you have seen in a TEDx speaker, and why?
Oh, that's cruel. Great question. But that's cruel. I can't really mention people. I'm going to tell a story about the biggest improvement from the coaching perspective. In other words, we were failing one of our speakers. When we coach people, we try to get them to stand with grace and authority on the beautiful red little carpet that we have. And we were coaching someone, and she was really struggling. And by the third coaching session, she was still struggling, just standing and sharing. And we're doing this as a group, a small group, right? So we were like, okay, this is really worrying because we've only got 2 more weeks, and then she's on the stage and she just can't get it out, you know? So we took her aside, because you never know what else is going on in people's lives. So we were thinking that, like, are you all right? What's going on? You know? And she was going, I just can't do that. And I was like, what do you mean? Just can't do that? Right. I said, well, tell us about what you can do. And what's magic about this lady, she won't mind me sharing this, is that she's a funeral director. And it's quite challenging to think about what funeral directors get involved with, right? And she said, I know it sounds silly, but my most authentic and useful self is when someone comes in and I'm sat on the sofa with them, and it's highly charged because they're bereaved, but I feel I'm not at my best professionally, and I'm just sitting down with them, and I'm being empathetic, and I'm compassionate, and trying to help them to forge a beautiful send-off for whomever they just lost. We were like, okay, that goes against everything that we are trying to get you to do. Of course, what if we just get you to sit down on a nice chair on the stage, rather than asking you to stand, because she never does that. She sits, she empathizes. And the second we sat her down on a chair, it became intimate. It became beautiful, almost, I would say. And we were failing her because we had an expectation of what we think she should be doing as a speaker, right? And we learned so much from that experience, because, again, that was the most improved, but it was because we were failing her, not because she was failing us in that regard. So hopefully that answers your question.
Wow. That was an amazing answer for a very good question. Indeed. Last question, I hope it's not the last. What other models of storytelling do you recommend, but therefore model for science storytelling? This is from Margaret.
There is a great video out there, another TED Talk. Sorry, I lean into those so heavily, but I consume a lot, right? There's a TED Talk by a guy called Derek Sivers, spelled S-I-V-E-R-S, Derek Sivers, and it's how to start a movement. And it's a 3-minute TED Talk, not one of the long ones. So for 3 minutes, he stands on the TED stage and he speaks to a little video that's playing in the background. And it's a video of someone dancing on the side of a hill. And he explains an abstract leadership concept through some, what looks like drunk people, dancing on a side of a hill at a festival somewhere, and other people join. So what I find interesting about that as a storytelling model is he's using other people's content and adding an extra layer of storytelling, a kind of a nuanced layer that has a metaphor that extracts like the learning from this thing that just has people dancing, but he talks about leadership and bravery and embracement of followers from that. Now, from a storytelling perspective, that is the cheapest way you can go about telling a story, is borrow other people's content and tell a story on top of it and extract some wisdom from it. Like I did with the TED Talk from OK Go, and I added up it. You didn't need to hear it. All I was trying to illustrate from that, there is other players telling other bits of the story. They were participants. They weren't just sat down while someone else takes all the glory, right? So again, I was taking someone else's content to try and get you think very differently and add a new narrative to it. So think about that as the most simplest storytelling model out there. Utilize other people's content and extract some, or layer in a metaphor to extract some wisdom from it.
We have more questions.
Oh, cheeky.
Next one in line. What techniques do you yourself use when you're helping an expert refine their presentation, especially when their content is far out of your wheelhouse? What questions do you ask them?
A couple of questions. I asked them, well, why does this matter for the audience? So I don't need to understand it. I just need to understand that they understand that it matters to the audience. And then secondly, I'm like, well, humanize it, make it real. You can create personas or made up people or made up scenarios in towns and stuff like that. I don't care how you do it, but humanize it. Don't just say this is going to revolutionize. Go further and humanize as much as possible. Tell the impact stories. So yeah, I've been involved in things where I don't really understand, and I swear above my pay grade. We had a guy speaking at TEDx in 2017 talking about DNA sequencing, and he had a little USB thing, and apparently that's the technology now. You kind of do this, and he DNA'd something live on the stage for us, and I didn't know how I think it's magic and witchery. I wanted to burn him at the stake, but it was wonderful, right? But I was like, humanize it. Why does that matter? So he told the stories about, so think about in your kitchen now, you can literally take a little piece of tomato, drop it on this machine. In 20 minutes, it tells you not just the type of tomato it is, but genome sequence it to where it comes from in the world, right? And then you can teach your kids through that. Okay, now I understand the potential of this stuff very simply, and that could be extrapolated out to then when you go into the doctor's office, you can see if it's viral versus just a common cold, stuff like that. So he humanized it for us. But when he first started speaking, it was just like all tech. So yeah, we can understand through human stories.
Okay. What about stage fright? We have a question. What is the best way to deal with mega stage fright?
Thank you for that question. And it's so important. There's a couple of things I'll respond to there. It's correct. First of all, don't dismiss it. You're supposed to be scared. It's your brain telling you the right thing because it's old and it wants to go. There's a lot of eyeballs on you. Run to the forest and be safe, right? Because you're going to be food or you're in trouble either way, right? So forgive yourself for that, first of all. The physiological responses that come from fear can actually be hacked. So this works for half the people. The other half of people will probably need more therapy, a dark room and held and just be rocked. But for the other half of the people, this is a great Jedi mind trick, which is to tell yourself you're not nervous, you're excited. You're not nervous, you're excited. You're not nervous, you're excited when you feel the nerves. So what you're trying to do is trick the brain to a new neural pathway to connect what you're feeling to something else emotionally. And I'll give you an example of this, or a couple, is when you go and see your favorite ever sports team or band, or when you go on a roller coaster or watching a horror film and you love that kind of stuff, you get a physiological response that could be seen by many to be negative. If it was a negative situation, heart rate rises, you get all kind of sweaty and kind of out of breath, mouth goes all dry. Now that's excitement as well as nervousness. So it's actually, you can trick the brain, not the body, because you want your brain to then regain the physiological response to reinforce that you're feeling excited. Because when I'm stood on the side of stages with people and you can see they're nervous and they're doing that classic case of looking down and running through the script in their head. They shouldn't be doing scripts, but you know what I mean? They're running through the thing in their heads and they're like this going, okay, I'm on in a minute. Right, okay. And you go up to them and go, you're not nervous, you're excited. You're not nervous, you're excited. And it kicks in and it goes from this to, yeah, I'm excited, from nervous to excitement, right? And they walk on differently. And I know it sounds cheap and cute even as a Jedi mind trick, but for a lot of people, that's all they need is that kind of neurological switch in their brain to go, of course I'm going to feel this. It's okay. Because how many people do you know go, I hate public speaking, but once I'm into it, I'm all right. But I just hate, starting and doing that stuff. That's because your brain is telling you the wrong story. So tell your brain a different story and your body will follow.
Lead with passion. Fantastic. We have two more questions. One is from Susan. Can you tell us a little about your creative leadership work?
Really simply, it was an event that I put on for the last 3 years, apart from this year, because I pressed pause because of COVID. I want to give everybody just some downtime. But the idea is to bring creativity as a discipline and leadership as a discipline together, like a Venn diagram, and try to smash them into each other and stand back and just watch the wreckage, the beautiful wreckage. Because I want creative people to see themselves as leaders, and I want leaders to see themselves as creatives, but they don't. And I'm really interested in that intersectionality of the two disciplines, because we need more creative leaders and we need more creatives who are leaders as well. So you can see what I'm trying to do is I'm scratching my own itch. I want to go to an event that has brilliant people who can tell great stories that actually transcend those both worlds. So I've been doing it for the last couple of years. Like I said, 3 times we've run it. It's on creativeleadership.nz. Paused it this year. It's a self-funded thing. So it was stupid me just taking a risk, but luckily I've made some profit of it, very small, but enables me to do it every year and justifies it for paying the rent a little bit. But I really love curating that, and I must admit I'm really hungry to do again next year.
And we look forward to seeing you again. I have one last question from Kelsey. Would you be able to comment about the value of storytelling from an internal communications perspective within an organization and from a leadership perspective?
I think I mentioned it before that I meet a lot of leaders, and I don't have to be leaders, but I meet a lot of people who are great at telling a story, and I meet a lot of people who are good public speakers. They are usually leaders. And what I mean by good public speakers is that they have no problem doing it. They can stand up, they hold themselves well with grace and authority, but they lose out when it comes to the actual storytelling. So again, going back to the Venn diagram, just because it's the easiest thing in my brain visually to think about, there are a group of people who are great storytellers one-on-one and can communicate very well, but stick them in front of a group, they kind of crumble a little bit. And you're thinking, well, you just told me that really saliently over there now, because of nerves and other things, right? And then we get the other side of that spectrum where there's leaders who always like, yep, let me up there. But then you're like, get to the point, come on, you haven't humanized it for me, and they just go off on one because they like the sound of their voice and they think that's what leadership is speaking, and it's not. Sometimes leadership is quietening and allowing other people to tell their story. So from an internal comms perspective, the leadership role is not to speak, I don't think. The only time you should be speaking as a leader is to ignite and catalyze the vision and the mission and the purpose of what your people are doing, and to enable them then to have voice. The purpose of a good leader in any entity is to create better leaders, full stop. So it is about distributed leadership, devolvement, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, sometimes the best people on the stage for me aren't the CEOs. And I've booked CEOs of big multinationals or big government departments. And I'm like, yeah, you didn't write that, for one, and you didn't come here prepared. You swanned in and you've left. How many conferences we've been to and experiences we've had with that? And I don't want them. I want the people who are passionate and who are doing it, right? And that's the role of the leaders, to identify those people in the organization and then to enable them to have opportunities to spread the good word, wherever that might be.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, DK. Let's give him a round of applause, even though just me here. Well done, and what a wonderful presentation. Fleur also says, kia ora, brilliant session. Thanks, DK and all. So interesting and lots of useful practical tips for science communicators. I was wondering, since we can't applaud you live because we can't unmute everybody, maybe we can follow you on Twitter or Facebook. Which one would that be?
Yeah, the Twitter is my favorite one, I must admit. So I'm on justadnak.com, spelled out that way, justadnak, or sign up to my website. I got a blog that I actively use, or just email me, old school email, Love it. Let's take it and
Fantastic.
make connections.
Fantastic. Now, before we go, I have just a small announcement to make. Story Collider will follow this today. Tune in at 4:30 to watch newly trained storytellers tell personal tales with a pinch of science. Then join us again on Monday next week at 12:30 for the next seminar, which is Matauranga Maori and Science Communication, Bridging to Knowledge Systems. Learn from the success of Te Putahi Iwi Radio Pilot program, a weekly show sharing a Maori perspective on science research and making it useful for Haukainga, the home people. Speaker is Peter Lucas Jones. Hakite, and we look forward to seeing you again. And thanks once again, DK, for this fantastic talk today. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.